So I'm really excited to have Marguerite Rigaglioso with me today. She is the author of The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception. That is backwards on my screen, but it's this book image right over here or here, I can't remember. And so I just want to share Marguerite's bio before we dive in. Hello, Marguerite. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Hello, Michelle. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. So Marguerite is a PhD and is the foremost authority on the history of virgin birth and has taught graduate and undergraduate courses in both the United States and the United Kingdom. She's the founding director of Seven Sisters Mystery School, and she's the author of The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece and Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, two big scholarly tomes, and she lives in Western Massachusetts. So that's the formality part of this interview. Um, and I want people to know, like, you are a heavy hitter here. You come from this majorly scholarly background and you blend in this incredible. I'd like for you to just describe your method because it's very unique, I think, with how you research and write about such an esoteric topic.
Yeah. I started with a flash of insight about this topic of divine birth back in, I'm thinking it was 2001, when I was still getting my master's degree, prior to me even going into the PhD. I had a flash of insight that divine birth was real. And then I read Drunvalo Melchizedek's book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. And he said, Thoth told him divine birth is real, his guide, Thoth. And so when I started researching for a dissertation that I wanted to write to catalog every single mention of Greek priestesses in antiquity, I kind of had that rolling in the back of my mind. And as I went through all of these references and excerpts and fragments about ancient priestesses in the Greek tradition, I found all of this evidence to support the idea that divine birth was real in in ancient Greece.
Oh, wow.
And so that began this like weave, this back and forth between the intellectual and the intuitive with this grand research about divine birth, where I kind of started with an inductive process, a hypothesis already, and went to find evidence. But then it would be deductive in that I would find all of these disparate pieces of evidence, and I would realize that I was having to put them together to create new theories or, new hypotheses from that. So it was inductive and deductive. And it was intuitive in that a lot of times I would just receive these intuitive downpours and then have to go prove them.
Right.
Okay. So sometimes the hypotheses were not just coming out of the material that I was reading, but they were coming through these open state intuitional moments. And so that was the process. It was really what I call a figure eight. And I wrote all about divine birth in ancient Greece. And for my dissertation, which led to my two books, I was already starting to look at Mary, the Virgin Mary, and I was already starting to look at the Vestal Virgins and the women of West Asia, but there was and Egypt, and I did write about the women, the divine birth priestesses of Egypt in the dissertation, but that didn't make it into the book. And I didn't even have room to put these latter things that I was mentioning, especially about Mary, into the dissertation. It was already 600 pages. And so, luckily my partner at the time was, hey, I think you better cut it now. And that was just the best advice ever, because knowing when a project is complete is key. And in fact, with this book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, I was already writing what's going to be my second book on Mary. And I realized I had to break it in half, because I thought people are not going to be able to stay with both this part of it, which is in this present book, which is the deep dive into one of Mary's suppressed gospels to show how she was part of a divine birth lineage. They weren't going to be able to do that and also listen to all the other things that I had researched about Mary and had to say about her. I knew they were two separate books eventually. So that's where we are. That's a little bit about my process.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is just so exciting because I heard mention of it somewhere along the road. And I was just like, this is a very feminine process, you know,
Yeah.
and very so-called masculine, lots of stuff you had to digest. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was rigorous. It's always been rigorous for me, but I love it.
yeah,
I have to say, I was born for this,
yeah,
right? I mean, I was always a born student
yeah,
from grade school. And so luckily, right? Because
yeah.
I'm the one for this task, I'm the one for that job of of having some intuitive awareness, but also being able to have the academic chops and pull it off. And interestingly, nobody in academia has touched it. No reviews, no commentary. They just ignore it, which is a good sign because they can't penetrate it. They can't argue it.
Hmm.
The minute they start going and looking into it, they see how deeply researched and well documented it is and how I acknowledge what my perspectives are.
Mhm.
So they just don't go there.
I wondered how that has been for you to be pretty much on your own in this vast subject that you have excavated on your own almost like you, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well, Michelle, thankfully, when I was writing the dissertation, I was with a partner who was a spiritual teacher and grounder and guide for me, Robert Owings, and I really have to thank him.
mm,
I was with him in relationship for about 9 years. And, this was like part of our baby together in a way. I mean, he would support me. He was like the Emma Young to me, right?
yeah.
And never really needing or wanting any credit. And he would mainly just keep me grounded and sane
Mm,
because sometimes I would get so nervous that I was doing something so wild that maybe it was just crazy and wrong.
right.
And then he would be there because he had been a cosmonaut into the other dimensions of consciousness, just aiding and abetting me, and every once in a while adding a little bit of flavor or idea or something. And that was invaluable because I don't know that I would have had the stamina quite to do this on my own because sometimes it gets so scary that you're like, wait, is this just totally insane? And then, oh my gosh, have I covered all of the literature that I needed to look at? Is there any stone left unturned? Did I forget about, at the last minute as I was getting the dissertation ready for my committee, I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. What did Maria Gimbutas say about parthenogenesis? And it was like, oh, sure enough, she did say things. So I had to include her in the literature review part for the dissertation, which is not really in the books,
Okay.
but it's something you have to show validation for, to what degree this subject has been written about in literature previously, to what degree it hasn't, how are you new, da 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 da. So
Wow.
it was rigorous. It was just a rigorous love process. It was like a 9-month process, miraculously enough. I mean, all of these pages and words, I basically handled it in 9 months.
What?
Yeah, that was the dissertation that became the first two books. I know. It came out of me so fast. It was like a
Oh
woman in labor who has the baby in an hour. Um, and now this book really only took me 4 months to write because again, it was already gestating. It was
yeah.
so ready to come out.
I'm like really blown away because this feels like when, I've been reading those two scholarly ones, chapter here, chapter there, whenever it connects to what I want to research. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so, I mean, it's actually more readable than I expected it, because I was aware of your work 10 years or in 2009 when we first connected through a
Yeah.
Karen interview, and you were generous to share with me a manuscript or your thesis, I'm not sure what it was, but I remember starting to read it and thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. And then being, I can't take this on for some reason. It's too, I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I wasn't ready, because I'm a feminist, and I would think that I would have been ready for it, but I wasn't. And that's why I think, and that's why when now that I'm full on, I'm right there with you, I'm sharing it whenever I can. So many women can't, they can't, they're just like,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
you know what, Michelle? That's why in this book, I made sure to make it extremely readable. I combed and combed and combed. I went through it numerous times
yeah,
to get out all of that academic ease, all of that academic writing, and make it entertaining.
you
And
did, you did.
limit the book, limit the footnotes and that type of thing.
But I wanted to say it wasn't so much, I mean, the academic part was, scary in the beginning, like 10 years or 12 years ago. And this time I'm reading it and I'm like, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. However, the concept of divine birth, I couldn't handle back then.
Yeah.
Like I really couldn't. And that's what women are having trouble with now. And I'm like, oh, I understand. It took me 10 years to get here. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that sort of learning curve for women?
You know, here's the thing. I've found enough women that are totally into it, and men.
Yeah.
Den Poitras, who wrote Parthenogenesis, Women's Long Lost Ability to Self-Conceive,
Yeah.
and Maureen Walton, whom has been a
Yeah.
great supporter, has had me teach at her Wildwood sojourn. And I taught, Grail Corsini was a big advocate
Mhm.
at the very beginning, and I taught up in Mount Shasta
Mm.
and Ashland, Oregon. So there've been enough women who
Right.
have totally gotten it. Not only gotten it, but like they're already off and running with it over these past, what is it, going on 12 years now,
Yeah.
to sustain me. And I've gone in and out of attention to this topic because after the first two books and the big, teachings that I did on that in 2012 and 2013, I've turned my attention toward other topics and other things. And I started Seven Sisters Mystery School.
Yeah.
And then I dipped back into it again, I think around 2016 or so.
Mhm.
But by that time, I was really starting to teach the Oracle training, and I was teaching on so many other topics.
Right.
And it really wasn't until this past, let's see, 2 summers ago, I was at Dahani Yuwahu's Sunray Center, I think, in Vermont. And I was speaking at lunch to these two women at my table. And I started talking about the Virgin Mary and the reality of divine birth. And they said, you need to write that book about Mother Mary. And, I'm going to thank them in the second book because I said, oh my gosh, yes, I really do.
Mm.
And that inspired me to go on my writing pilgrimage and my sabbatical back in 2019.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to think if I have the years right, but whatever. I went on my writing sabbatical, and that fall, I left California, my 20-year life in California. I gave away most of my things, put
Wow.
the rest in a very small storage unit, and even an even smaller amount in my Toyota with a Thule cargo rack on top, and started driving for this road trip that was going to take me back to California, but I stopped in the East Coast and never did go back. I ended up buying a little house here on the East Coast, closer to my family, and
Mm.
starting up again my East Coast life, which I never thought I would do in a million years. But here I am.
Mhm.
And so I felt very supported in the Berkshire Mountains to write the book, and really most of the second Mary book, as I've mentioned. And so here we are. So that's a little bit about my process. And from the academic perspective and the writing perspective that I don't often go into in many of these interviews. So I love how a lot of these conversations, all of these conversations are different.
Mhm.
And I think they are of interest to people who want like the whole story put together. You can just binge watch, however, all of these conversations.
Absolutely. Yes, I know. I realize I'm not really setting up some newbies about what this is all about, but I figured I'd be selfish and ask all the questions that I was really interested in. For
That's right. And your people will probably be just right in there with us, right? So I don't think you
Mhm.
really have to worry. We'll get to the deets.
We'll get to
Okay.
some deets. Okay, good. So yeah, why do you think you have been chosen for this subject? I mean, what is it in you that resonates with it?
Right.
I don't know if,
Well, a number of past lives, actually.
okay.
I finally realized that while I was writing the dissertation, which led to the first two books, I was occasionally using sacred medicine.
Mhm.
Not a lot, but occasionally. And I would have incredible downpours about my role in divine birth. And one of the things that happened in one of the ceremonies was that I had a narcissus in my house at that time. And the narcissus flower is famously the one that Persephone is picking or looking at when she's abducted by Zeus.
Right.
So, in this open state of consciousness, I had the strong sense that Zeus was coming through that narcissus flower. And I was like, oh my God. And I was with Robert at the time. And what I realized is that he wanted to kind of have his little way with me. And I said, absolutely not. But what came to me in the was a downpour that, oh my gosh,
Ah,
I have been with him before, and he attempted to interrupt and did interrupt my divine conception ritual and rape seduced me. And I broke my virgin vow. And it was because of that that I vowed to come back into another life and reveal all of the information about divine birth. Well, so that's fast forward to I'm now in Mount Shasta in maybe this was shortly after the books had come out around 2010. And I was teaching for this workshop, these women again who were totally getting it. And one of the women was a channeler for the Pleiades. And
oh,
that
great.
night she did a mushroom session for herself. And we all came. And in the same room where I was teaching, she did a channeling from the Pleiades with mushrooms. And she was deep in. And she said to me, oh, you're the one who you you gave birth to someone um, because of breaking your vow. I hadn't said that. I hadn't said that in that workshop. She said, "Well, you're the mother of who's that one that's famous with all the movies?" And I'm like, "Perseus?" She said, "Yeah, you were the mother of Perseus." So I went I instantly understood why I had created a visual chart of the lineage of Perseus going all the way back. Why had I done this? I'm probably the only one in the world who could ever piece this thing together. It was a slide that I would sometimes use showing the various generations where the divine birth was happening. And one of them was Danae, the mother of Perseus, who had been tricked by Zeus, rape seduced by him while she was in her divine birth conception ritual. How did he do it? He came to her as a shower of gold because that was the precise mechanism which the priestesses would use to conceive divinely, the flash of light or the shower of gold.
Mm.
So he came right in on that vibration and impregnated me with Perseus, who then went on to cut off the head of Medusa, who was another divine birth priestess, through a trap. It's like Perseus didn't really want to do it, but there was a king who wanted his mother and wanted to have marry her. And he made a condition that his mother could retain her virginity as long as Perseus cut the head off Medusa. And
Oh.
what I was shown in ceremony is that, oh, so Perseus under duress cut the head off Medusa to support his mother and save her,
Mm. Mm.
but the king raped me anyway. So I figured all of this out after I had already in Italy created this mass national movement to reattach Medusa's head. Okay. In in my first divine birth priestess class that I taught, I believe it was 2012, I started having the women for the Athena module, because priestesses of Athena were divine birth priestesses. I had the women start doing rituals to reattach Medusa's head. So when I went to Italy to teach about this in, I think it was about 2015, I, you know, the women got all excited about this. Okay. So I may be having my years a little bit off in terms of when I was teaching what, but I'm pretty sure that um, that Medusa head attachment ritual happened before I realized that I'm the reincarnation of Deny.
Okay.
So it's just that these things, you can't explain to anyone who isn't already an initiate into the mysteries of the other realms of reality, and who understands about reincarnation, etc.
Mhm.
So there I was, and I was trying to make karmic amends for all of these messes that had happened through my own breaking my virgin vow by allowing myself at the last instant to be seduced by Zeus, who put on a really strong force, because see, they would interrupt these women at the orgasmic moment during their ritual.
Oh.
So it would be like the orgasm is kind of already in process, and then they come in, and there's no way that a woman can like pull back her orgasm. And then she's cathecting it to the presence of this god. And so then the impregnation happens through the god. I mean, that's how wily and awful these interdimensional Anunnaki reptilians have been.
Wow. Thank you. That is incredible. I have to say that, yeah, I mean, who else can explain all of this? You know what I mean? The way you just explained it, because when I was researching Enheduanna, the Mesopotamian first named author,
Yes, that's how we connected.
that's how we connected.
Remember?
Yeah. And I kept hearing about the sacred marriage, the sacred marriage, the sacred marriage, and being so intrigued by it. But there was, of course, nothing that I could find at the level of research I was doing that would explain. And I would talk to, I interviewed some ancient Near Eastern scholars for my documentary about her, and they would say, well, they're meant to be mysteries, that they have to be secret because they're meant to be mysteries. So really, it's not been touched on really how it actually works. And nowadays you hear people talking about the sacred marriage like it's some amazing thing between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And it sounds good, but I don't know that we understand that it's, this is what I want to ask you. Are all sacred marriage references the devolution of the parthenogenic high ritual of creating a divine being, or do you think there might be some sacred marriage? And I don't know if you know this, but I'm just curious if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I
Okay,
think that there's a spectrum of miraculous conception from pure
right.
parthenogenesis all the way to high tantric sacred marriage.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that high tantric sacred marriage can be at the same level as pure parthenogenesis,
Right.
but they kind of all took a dip, whoop, in how they were done, so that parthenogenesis started turning into sex with a disembodied male god,
Mm-hmm.
and high tantra started turning into like the Egyptian pharaohs impregnating the priestesses.
Mm,
So I think a lot of things were happening simultaneously, some high vibration, some not.
right.
The other thing that happens is that scholars will basically deny the idea that sacred marriage resulted in any sex
Mm-hmm.
or that it could have resulted in the birth of a child.
Right.
So, this is a maddening phenomenon. That is how academia continues to induce mind control on the public. Now, there's a book that gets close to the possibilities that I'm talking about. It's called Sacred Marriages, and it is edited by these two fellows, but there are a bunch of articles in it that are excellent because I went in and mined them and then did my own intuitional, interpretation of what they were saying. But I'm like, aha,
Right.
there's the evidence, or there's the evidence, right? And they just help me save time and get right to it.
Oh, great.
Um, so, I think a lot has been going on, and it has been a mixed bag, probably continuing on into present day, because I think that these divine birth rituals have continued to be used in the royal lineages
Ah.
with and by certain bloodline families, but in a very, very inverted way,
Whoa.
which is part and parcel of the beings that work with these people. They're all about these, what I call sadistic inversions. So anything that is valuable and high vibration is taken, hijacked, and twisted around.
Right. Right.
And up becomes down, right becomes left, black becomes what, it's just a crazy thing.
Right. Okay. Well said. Well said. Yeah. I appreciate that. Um, so okay, so the high tantric version, let's say, is there would that be sort of the Indian equivalent of the Greek parthenogenesis, or oh no, the high tantric is different because it's a male and a female, right?
Yes,
It's not
yes. So
trying to produce a child. It's just a high level union.
right.
Okay.
It can result in the birth of a child, the conception of a child, or it can also be used as a magical means of conducting energy to the people or throughout the land using sex magic for different purposes.
Okay. So this is,
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
This would be like when I was reading about In Tantric Quest. I don't know if you ever read that book.
Oh,
Okay, so he has this initiation with this wild Dakini woman. I don't know if she's a Dakini, but she initiates him, and he's a guy in France, and this is a real story. And to me, that's very high vibration. It wasn't to produce, to conceive or anything, but it was high, as you're describing it, high sex
yes.
magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, sex can be used for so many things, positive and negative,
Right.
as we're coming to find out more and more and more.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, I mean, the stages of divine birth that I discerned that it went from pure parthenogenesis, daughter bearing.
Right.
The woman would give birth conceived through no sexual presence of a male at all, in or out of body, and she would give birth to like almost a replica of herself in a sense. And then the next phase was that the women would be able to start producing, conceiving males in this way. But then the next phase is the interruption of that parthenogenesis by these beings, usually unbidden, experienced as rape, seductions. And then the latter phase of that is that the women started cultivating that, because under pressure by increasing patriarchal priesthoods and so forth, they realized that their powers were being taken away, but they could still garner all of the honors and so forth of divine that go along with divine birth by cooperating in this work with these male gods. So they did that. And then the next phase is um, a male figure is needed because the codes are lost, or the woman is no longer able to either parthenogenetically give birth or conceive through a non-embodied being. So now you need a male figurehead. These are the pharaohs, to impregnate the woman, but still through a ritual that would be considered a divine conception.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a variation on everything, which is that after an embodied male being crosses over to the other side, an impregnation can happen on the part of the priestess interdimensionally, but it requires the use of a sacred phallus, a dildo. And
Ah,
that's the story of Isis. That's the situation with Isis.
okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Wow. Um, so in this book, you start talking about the muse. Can you share, is that, did you talk about her because she was sort of an example of how Mary might have done this, or?
Yes, yes. It shows you. So that story of the muse on the mountain is taken from a Nag Hammadi text, I believe.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's I think it's from the Revelation of Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it shows us that there was a living belief in antiquity that a woman could conceive parthenogenetically,
Mm.
because the little excerpt tells us that a muse goes to the mountain, meaning she's a sacred woman who's in touch with the oracular knowledge and she has powers. She goes to a mountain and spends time sitting there, which means she's going into a deep, altered, meditative state of consciousness in isolation on a sacred mountain so that she can connect with astral energy. And she gets into a state of sexual energy and desire so that she becomes androgynous. And through this process, she's able to self conceive. And the name of her child is called Seth. But this is basically describing the mechanism for parthenogenesis of a male child. So,
Oh,
yes, this would be a template for Mary.
and Mary is very unusual because it doesn't seem like there are other examples of that high of a level
Exactly.
divine birth ritual, right? Why, well, I guess, yeah, I'm just curious how that sort of connects in the whole lineage.
Right. She's a bit of an anomaly because she's coming later in time
Mm-hmm.
during the Roman Empire, but she's still doing a very ancient technique that's
Mm-hmm.
pure, that predates everything else that was going on during that time of antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Her mother, Anne, does the purest form, which is to give birth to Mary parthenogenetically. And that's in that suppressed gospel about Mary called the Infancy Gospel of James.
Right.
That is the basis of my book's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
So Anne first does this process, conceives Mary. Mary then does this process and conceives Jesus.
Right.
Across the corridor there, Anne's probable sister, Elizabeth, gives birth and conceives and gives birth to John the Baptist. So they're all part of a lineage, and their lineage goes back to Sarah, who in her elder years gives birth to Isaac.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there are there are divine birth stories in the Bible and so forth.
Right.
So Mary is doing a very ancient and pure practice of this in order to bring the highest level, or perhaps, probably, arguably, the highest level divine child that has ever walked the planet through this mechanism, because she was so pure. She had had so many lives. She potentially, according to Rudolf Steiner, and this rings true to me, was Isis in her previous incarnation. So therefore, she was already perfecting this thing and trying out the dildo method. It's like, all right, been there, done that. Now it's just going to be the pure parthenogenesis. So she got set up by being born that way from her mother, because see, the purpose of this is to bring in an avatar, a high holy being. It was understood that only a being this high could come in through virgin birth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the reason for it. So yes, Mary was working at a very extremely high holy level. Basically, even in her lifetime, she merged with Mother Divine. She had a full merge, so that she didn't even have to wait until her ritual death in order to ascend.
Oh.
She ascended within her lifetime, according to Sri Kaleshwar, who
Mm.
brings forth another tremendous amount of information about her through his own past life recall,
Mm.
and what he says are the ancient palm leaf manuscripts of India. And that's going to be in my next book on Mary. So
Okay. Okay. I was curious what the difference between the two books were. Okay.
yeah, so that's going to get into some of that, really more mystical.
Mm.
In this book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, I really stick with that infancy gospel
Mm-hmm.
and just show that there's even enough there to show that Mary was actually doing this, and how she was doing this, and
Right.
how she was part of a lineage. I mean, I go off I'll take one word and go off for pages on this to be able to show
Right.
what was actually happening
Yeah.
in a very understandable, readable form. And
Yes.
I consolidate the information from the previous two books into one handy chapter, chapter one, so that people can just get the bullet points, and the headlines of what divine birth is all about, its stages, and what it required, what some of the things were that the priestess needed to do in order to accomplish it, etc.
I have to thank you for that, because it is so well done how you do it, like how you bring all this background into a way that is really like manageable and understandable, and how
Well,
you would.
Michelle, I have to say that I had really good writing training through a job that I had at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And my first supervisor there was a really good editor for me. Yeah. And then I worked at the Harvard Business School's alumni magazine, and I had one, two, three, four excellent editors who would read my articles, cross out and write in red pencil, hand it back to me. This is in the days before uh, track changes. You had to
Mm.
physically input, and that's how I learned how to write. I mean, I already had facility with writing and a bit of a voice,
Mhm.
but those five people I really credit with, it takes a village, all right? So Marguerite, anybody to learn how to write, it takes a village. So yeah, I had this village of five people at Harvard, bless its Illuminati heart. You know, uh, but yeah, something good came out of Harvard. All right. Thank you very much. Supported Marguerite. Whatever other shenanigans they're doing over there, we don't know, but at least something. So yeah, I mean, I learned how to write, and therefore it was nothing for me to write a dissertation because I'd already, one of my major initiations was writing an article for New Age Journal called, I think it was called Return of the Goddess,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when Joan Oliver was the editor there, and she had me do, and it was like, and back in the old days when
Mm.
articles could be long and they could continue on page 749 in the back of the magazine, and they had lots of photos, and I interviewed like 20 members of the women's spirituality movement, leaders at the time. This is back in the late 90s, and I somehow wove this article together. It was like, but that was my first real weaving um, in the craft of writing
Mm.
in the nonfiction genre. And those were all good trainings for me to be able to do this dissertation in 9 months, to do this book in 4 months. And I bless every bit of it because, at the time I would be enjoying those writing jobs, but at some point it was getting like, oh my God, at 9 to 5, what am I doing? This is boring. And but my old boss, Bill Parent, would say, when you look back on your life, you'll see how all the threads come together. And that is true.
Wow.
So it all sort of came together in me being able to write it with lightning speed through all of that early training.
Wow. Okay. This is starting to make more sense how you were
Yeah, it's
able to
not
pull
just that
this
I was
off.
like totally gifted. It was like I had to work hard, okay?
Yeah.
I worked hard. I was typing in a lot of edited phrases and stuff from these far more eloquent, writers at the time than I.
Um, so are you, because I mean, you basically, your books are like trainings for others to start being able to discern clues in other cultures of divine birth. And that's what's happened for me by reading and studying your books, is that, if I have a hint of feeling there's got to be some divine birth energy somewhere here. Sometimes, I mean, I haven't done a lot, but I know with, for example, Radha, the goddess Radha, I was able to find some hints and clues
Yeah.
because of this training that you've got. Are you interested in going beyond, like further into other cultures? Are you going to stop at any point with all of this research? And
Well, I'm not sure. I'm really curious about the Aztec virgins of the sun,
oh,
which is interesting to mention that today because this is the eclipse day that we're filming.
yes,
Blood moon eclipse. The day
yes.
of this filming is Wednesday, May 25th, 26th, excuse me, 2021. And at 7:13 a.m. Eastern time, there was the blood moon eclipse. And Sergio Magana, who is a teacher in Mexico and elsewhere,
Mhm.
who carries the Toltec lineage, basically says that the understanding is that this is the move into the new dimension and the sixth sun. I
Mm.
think they call it the fourth dimension. In my mind, it's the fifth dimension.
Right.
So we have really moved into that. And so, what were those Aztec virgins of the sun all about?
Yeah.
Anyone intrepidly care to go ferret around libraries and ancient, bas reliefs
Yeah.
down in Mexico? That would be a really good project. Um, another good project that I do have in mind closer to home that I might want to do is looking at the Arthurian stories of,
Mm.
I've talked about this extemporaneously, but Guinevere and her relationship to Arthur,
Mm.
Lancelot and his relation to Elaine,
Mm.
Igraine, the mother of Arthur, and her
Oh.
relationship to Uther Pendragon.
Mm.
You see, there are clues. Whenever you have an unusual birth or conception or an unusual sex story, like so and so changed his identity and she thought he was this, but he was really that, these are all stories of secretly indicating that a divine birth ritual is taking place. Or a woman's husband or Zeus appeared to her in the likeness of her husband. You get that? I write about this a lot in The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, my first book. Those are signs
Yeah.
of a divine birth conception ritual where Zeus becomes, the husband is a stand-in for Zeus to come in and impregnate the woman. So this is, yes, these codes, it'd be nice for people to take these codes and go out to all the literature and iconography of the world and see where this has been. Of course, I do write a bit about this, and Den Poitras, of course, writes more about it throughout the world. And there are previous books that I drew on um, that talk about divine birth in other contexts. But the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois, they have the story of the peacemaker as the divinely born being by his mother,
Mhm.
Kahedasuk, and that whole story.
Yeah.
Um, the Chalagi or Cherokee have a similar overlapping story. I'm not sure if it's the same peacemaker
Mm.
that they're talking about as well, but there's a divine birth story there.
Mm.
There are divine birth stories that are cataloged all over. I believe Krishna is considered a divine birth. Okay, right. So weren't you just saying Radha?
Radha, yeah.
Right. Okay, well then, but Radha and Krishna are coupled.
Right.
But I think Krishna is divinely born.
I think so.
There's stories about like the goddess Matsu in Taiwan. You
Mhm.
know, yeah, you can
Yeah.
start ferreting them out.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, I think because of your work and then meeting Maureen Walton talking about the Haudenosaunee, the peacemaker, and then Den Poitras having a real person that he knew,
That's right.
right? I mean, these are the ways that I was able to then go back to you and go, I have I have to read more. I have to read Marguerite again
Yeah.
and really dive in now. Because I mean, you bring such a credibility, like a realness in from the ancient past, with all of your, I mean, you document it so, well.
Thank you. Well, Marguerite, she has had so many lives as a virgin, far more as a virgin than anything else. That we're having to do something for her in this lifetime because, she's so used to that she practically is living in a cloister. And she wants that to change now. She's putting it out there. All right. Enough with the divine birth, enough with the virgin priesthoods, the nunneries, which let's not even go into that. How many lives did she have as a nun? There's lots of hundreds of years that she could have kept reincarnating for that. And so now she just wants to have, a normal human life. She's off to a good start with the topics that she's talking about, which, are just the stuff of the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, right? She's right in there. So we're having to work with her to kind of tone it down a little if she wants to have a normal life.
So this persona who is speaking, when did she start to pop into your life?
Well, Marguerite, this happens again when she was using what she calls sacred medicine and aka drugs. We are two beings. We are two beings in one. We are Gloria and Sylvia. We are the two beings from Long Island in the fifth dimension.
Oh.
And we're Marguerite's top guides, we'd say. She thinks it's the Virgin Mary, but we beg to differ. Because where would she be without us?
Really? I don't know. Wow, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. We're happy to be here. Provide a little extra whenever necessary into the conversation.
Well, it adds so much, I must say, Gloria and Sylvia.
I love those girls.
They're fabulous. They're
Yeah.
fabulous.
They keep me real.
They keep you real. I know. I mean, this is heady stuff, what
Yeah.
you're talking about. And um um
Interestingly, they came in right around the time, I guess it was a bit after I had, it was when I was putting the book version together of my dissertation. They were starting to come in those medicine sessions, and oh my God, I would just crack up. So, um, and they just periodically like to come in, and it's just incredibly helpful.
I bet. I bet. When you say the medicine sessions, were you using the medicine specifically for information about this subject or
No,
no?
I do a medicine session every 4 to 8 weeks
Okay.
for about 15 years, just to get downpours of information from the other side on whatever topic.
Oh,
And boy, I got some really interesting stuff, and it's served as the foundation for many of my courses, much of my knowing, and so forth. But honestly, not a ton for the divine birth material. That was very few and far between did I go into medicine for that. It's almost like I wanted to really more rely
uh-huh.
on my intellectual intuitive process without strong open state for
Mm,
that. It's like I had to prove something to myself.
interesting.
And I never wanted to be accused of anything, you know. However, one time one woman said, "Let me ask you something. How much of this book did you channel?" Meaning the first book.
Oh,
And I basically said, I pretty much think I told her 50%, because that's kind of true. I mean, it was 50% intuitively received,
yeah,
50% academically validated, but of course it's all academically validated. So,
exactly. Okay, so that explains the 9 month, like being able to do it all in 9 months was that
yeah.
50% assist.
Yeah. I mean, every day, you know, so many days a week. I mean, 1 or 2 days a week, I would do freelance work for clients. That's how I supported myself during the dissertation writing, and I would always visualize, okay, I have to make at least $4,000 a month with this writing, and somehow I would do it. It got encapsulated into 2 days, and then the rest of the week I could work on the dissertation, and I would have the truckloads, cartloads of books going back and forth from interlibrary loan to the California Institute of Integral Studies. And I would be at night, I would read the book and put all these 7 million post-it notes all over everything. And then in the day, I would go through the post-it notes and add them into my running manuscript. So I never had to do note taking, because that would have slowed it up unbelievably. It was just purely pouring it in. And because I was such a good writer, I was able to already. And so I would have all these plots and this roughly narrative that was going on. And then I would, once all that research stuff was done, I would go back and comb and comb and comb and put together and rearrange and all of that. Yeah, this is for the writer listeners, the writer viewers.
Well, I
But
was
it's
gonna,
interesting for some people, like, dissertation or academic students, just to hear this process, because I don't talk about it a lot.
I was actually going to ask you how you managed all that information to keep track of it all. And so you just answered that question. So that is
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool.
and I would find that if I did writing days in a row, it would go quick, quick, quick. If I skipped one day, it would take me about 3 hours in the morning of the next writing session to get back into it. If I skipped 2 days, it would take like more than half a day. If I skipped 3 days, it'd be like 3/4 of a day before I got back in the rhythm. Like, it was a really interesting process. And I had to make sure I was eating a lot of protein,
Mm,
because I would be burning up so much energy. And then sometimes it was conducting so much high voltage information that I would literally have to lie down on my very nice white rug in the office at the time that I had this big office. And I would just be like, oh my God, you know, it just would feel so big.
Yeah.
And my partner at the time's daughter she really got it as well. And she, you know, a couple of times I would come out to dinner and I would say, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," and she would say, "Somewhere in an obscure town in Northern California, a woman has just discovered, you know, the secret of life," you know, or right, because it was like I would be saying these things that were so earth-shattering,
Yeah.
and they both knew it and I knew it, and it was like amazing that it's taken, you know, 12 years for it to really start getting out there. But I think it's all in divine timing. Like we needed to have our world shattered by the shenanigans of COVID in order for and have this great awakening in order for people to be ready for anything like this in a much larger way than previously. Like you were saying it took you 10 years to go back to it. Like, I don't know what the hell this is.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Now
Okay.
it seems so simple, especially because of the book. Like it took me 10 years to be able to boil it down.
Yeah. Right. Which is a skill. I mean,
It's a
writing
skill.
this book is a skill based on all that other, all those other work, all that work you've done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been a cumulative process.
Yeah. What do you want women to get out of this book?
Well, I want all people to get out
And
of it
okay,
the fact that, right, all people,
all people,
because that's another whole story about what I received in medicine. I'll just digress for a minute.
please.
Um, in one of my medicine sessions, I got the very strong, stern question. So, you know, do you want to do this to split and divide, or
Mm,
do you want to bring it to unify? And do you want to bring it to torment men
mm,
or bring unity between men and women? Do you want to do it as an ego gratification or as a form of service? And I was like, oh my God, you know.
right.
And there's Marguerite on drugs trying to answer those questions, all right? You can imagine. She had a hands full that night.
But you know, like I'm there, oh my God. Okay, I know what the right answer is, and I know you're twisting my arm to what the right answer is, because you know I'm basically a warrior and I'm a fighter and I'm a truth teller and I'm a patriarchy slayer. And I had to distinguish I was not a manslayer.
Right.
I was a
Right.
patriarchy slayer, and that's different. And I was working it out at that time.
Wow.
You know, so they came in, whoever these they are, you know,
Right.
but I mean, clearly, like it felt like messages from the larger intelligence
Mm,
that were just checking in on me. And I had to say, okay, I am in service and I am here to unify. I'm not here to create more problems with this.
mm-hmm.
So my purpose and my hope in this is what's happening already. I mean, I love it when I'm getting on my Seven Sisters Mystery School Facebook page. I invite commentary and people are commenting on the books, or they're writing to me on Facebook Messenger, or they're sending me emails through the Seven Sisters Mystery School interface,
Right.
or they see my videos and contact me, and they're blown away, and it validates their own knowing or experiences they've had, or finally at long last somebody can make sense of this astral encounter that they had that they don't know what to make of, right? This astral sexual encounter.
Right.
And then recently, there was a woman who spoke to me over the past weekend and she said, I think I'm going to do this. And she's really the first person that I feel has the codes and is as a star seed enough to be able to do it. That was my first person, because I've had other people think about it, say about it, or take my classes with all sorts of strange ideas in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a new evolutionary leap. So what I'd like is for people to simply understand the powers of the Holy Womb,
Mm-hmm.
and that there is so much more we need to know in terms of codes of understanding and processes, and that we can resurrect divine birth with the purpose of bringing in positive avatars, because most likely this practice is being inverted and hijacked by negative forces to bring in negative being leaders on the planet, etc.
Right.
And I want people to understand how the divine birth process information trickles down into women who are not necessarily wanting to be celibates in order to do this or give divine birth or whatever, but they want a more elevated, high vibrational child in their union with men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my teaching, the teachings that I've been certified to teach, called the Holy Womb Chakra teachings, come in.
Mm-hmm.
Again, information that Sri Kaleshwar brought through from the palm leaf manuscripts that my teacher, Cindy, that he taught to Cindy Lindsay, and others. Cindy Lindsay taught to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I make this available. It's available on the Seven Sisters Mystery School website. And that allows people to conceive a divine child, they use those terms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
through regular union between men and women using a specialized mantra practice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, resurrecting divine birth and the trickle down effect for what it means for women's wombs, helping women to bring forth that power again.
And what about the women who don't want to have children or are beyond that age? It seems that it's also very powerful to elevate your womb.
That's right. The holy womb chakra practices are ideal for women of all ages. And I've had men and transgender people take it as well,
Mm.
because it's applicable
Mm-hmm.
for reasons I won't go into right now. But
Yeah.
Postmenopausal women
Mm-hmm.
gain a lot of power through the holy womb chakra teachings. And you have to remember that Anne, Elizabeth, and Sarah were technically postmenopausal. However, the difference there is that most likely through their entire lives, they had been trained as divine birth priestesses. So they were already carrying the codes. They just had not been able to accomplish it
Right.
until their elder years.
Right.
But this work, the divine birth material, dovetails and puzzle pieces in with the holy womb chakra material. And all of this is basically about elevating the powers of the womb beyond divine conception and beyond conception at all,
Mm-hmm.
into magical work,
Mm-hmm.
manifestation of things in reality,
Mm-hmm.
healing of others and self, and so forth, and merging and ascending and becoming one with Mother Divine, as Mary did, and as many of us are on the path to do, or wish to. We're talking a lot about ascension these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is all about the empowerment of the womb, and therefore the empowerment of all of humanity. It's about reclaiming our wombs and our sexual energy away from these beings who have subverted, siphoned, and inverted these energies and processes, have abducted and stolen our abilities and our parts for their agendas. And we are throwing all that off and reclaiming sovereignty for humanity. So that's this holy womb material, of which virgin birth is a part, but not, the only aspect of,
Right.
is critical right now for the great awakening that's happening.
Incredible. Well, I could go on, but I wonder if perhaps we should.
Well, why don't we have a few more questions?
Okay,
And
great.
we'll see where we go. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Because I was thinking about when I started researching this, when I started being open to this subject, to all of your work, I was led to Carlos Castaneda and his perception of the womb from the Toltec perspective is Do you know about it?
Oh,
Oh, well, this is
here we
another.
are with the Toltecs again.
That's right. This
That's
must be the
so
connection.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. His connection was that women had this womb, which allows them to have this connection to dreaming. And it's some mystical experience of dreaming. And he said that women at all, well, not necessarily he, but him and his Toltec sort of mass teachers said that women were naturally gifted with this power of having a womb that was this open vessel. And I don't understand it very well, but he said that women took it for granted and were just busy having children, when the men who really wanted to know about this and access this power had to work so much harder. But they took it more seriously. So they ended up becoming sort of the, you know, part of that Nawal, that whole mystical tradition. But his thing was that the primary purpose of the womb is, reproduction. The second is evolution.
That's right. And basically, Sri Kaleshwar says the same thing
Mm.
from the palm leaf manuscripts and his own inner knowing. He had his samadhi. He's no longer in body now. His samadhi is in, his burial mound is in Penakonda. But yes, that's pretty much exactly what he says.
Okay, so there's much to be mined in these, like, and other, right? It's all over, it feels like this.
And yes, and it's so interesting because what Sergio Magana was saying last night in this ritual that I think he conducted all night long into the eclipse time, he said that basically, since 2012, and especially accelerating now with this eclipse, it's the re-emergence of the feminine and the sacred feminine. Like the re-elevation, the rebalancing of the feminine onto the planet once more, the coming into their true power of women.
I'm getting chills on that for sure. Wow. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's a big breath one.
Yeah. I'm just going to look at my notes here because
Yes,
I
please.
want to make sure I do the Vestal Virgins. I read your whole book, but I remember them sticking out in my mind. I wonder if you could just mention why they're in this book.
Yeah, because I was showing how Mary was surrounded by priestesshoods that had virginity as a large component,
Mm-hmm.
and the use of their womb power as a large component,
Right.
and the training of women from very early in their lives. Now, Mary was since birth, but the Vestal virgins would start being trained from the time they were 6 years old. They would be given over to the temple, and then they had to have 30 years of service. So, what I show is that these practices were really alive and well in the ancient world. There is precedence for it. It's not so unusual. There were virgins in temples. That was an important thing. And I even show how there were virgins in the Hebrew temples and so forth.
Yes.
We bring it a little closer to home to Mary's tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I imply the contrast of Mary versus the Vestal Virgins and what happened to them, because by the time we get to the Vestal Virgins in Rome, they are completely disempowered girls and women. They have no autonomy and sovereignty at all. They're conscripted, they're used, they're spit out at the end of their 30 years. And what I show in the book is that it looks like some funny business was going on with them. There might have been occult divine birth practices going on there. that were usurped and hijacked for various means.
Right.
And so Mary was operating in and amidst all of that degradation and disempowerment as a very pure memory of how divine birth was originally done. And she was inserting it right into the middle of the Roman Empire.
Okay. Yeah, the way you write about it, it's like this, they were in a bubble somehow. They managed to escape being intruded upon and
Right, but not
co-opted.
really. They were able to get the divine child in, but they could not protect all the way to the end so that he didn't meet a demise
I
that's
see.
horrific and traumatic.
Right.
However, they made lemonade out of lemons with that situation. And Kaleshwar talks about this, and I will talk about it in the next book, that Mother Mary resurrected Jesus after the crucifixion through her own womb mechanisms.
I read that. I was blown away by that. That was, whoa,
Now that's deep,
that is deep.
okay? So it's not only divine birth, but divine death.
Right. Wow.
High level yogic practices that do have precedence in India and other places, Parakaya Pravesh. There's another one, it'll come to me. There are two mechanisms that are used, one to bring a body back to life and infuse it with soul. Another one is to take the body out, take the soul out temporarily. There are yogas that were known in India.
Mm.
And so that's the connection with India, that Jesus and Mary and Magdalene and others learned in India and from India, many of these practices.
Mm.
Okay.
Right. Yes, as I recall from Claire Hartsong's book, she had an interesting perspective on Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and how they were having sacred union through being in separate. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
it could well be, and I'd have to go revisit that
yeah,
myself
yeah,
just to see. I've tried not to read too deeply because I haven't wanted to get too influenced, but I love Claire personally also, and she and I have spoken, and she gave an endorsement for my book that's on the
yes,
back cover. You know,
yes,
she really understands that, wow, this is the time of the great revelation for all of this information. And she and I have been working kind of as a tag team on some level,
yeah.
right? Because she was channeling all that material while I was writing the dissertation on divine birth. I
I
know.
found that amazing when I found that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Because I read her book a
Yeah.
while ago, but I didn't, somehow the divine birth aspect didn't really permeate me. It still was this beautiful concept that I
I
couldn't,
know.
right?
I know.
And
Well,
and
that's
it
why
just takes a while.
it does. It does. I mean, well, this is how much the veil has been put and the programming has been put over this, so we cannot even see it.
Yeah.
To the point where you, womb woman extraordinaire, had to take 10 years to get these veils and layers of soot off of you to be able to access your own womb power and knowing. This programming is so deep in the medical establishment, in academia, in religion, uh, that here we are. It's taken 2,000 years to throw off that programming.
Yeah.
To even be able to see this.
Yes. I think it was Claire Hartsong who wrote in one of her emails, she said something like, if you want to hide something from someone, put it right in front of them.
Exactly.
And it's worked very well.
It's worked very well because what you do is you put it in front of them and then you go like this. Eh. You just tilt it
Yeah.
just a little. They don't even have to do that much work around it to obscure what's going on or twist it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's magic. That's
Negative magic.
negative magic. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are calling out and releasing now, clearing,
Definitely.
because we're not going to put up with it anymore.
No. no. And you know, it's interesting actually. I just had this flash. Oh my gosh. I just had this flash that, oh boy, they've managed to help us disconnect our brain from our body
That's
and
right.
our womb. And apparently that's what the vaccine does
Apparently, yeah, you know, um,
to a higher, I don't
an
know.
ongoing progress, program that this is like their final hurrah.
Yeah. And I think that's why my approach with the womb power classes is to just keep feeling your womb and how it's connected to the various chakras and parts of your
Yeah,
body. Just keep somatically reconnecting wherever
that's
there's been
right.
a disconnect.
That's right. And I decree that anyone who has received a vaccine and wishes to undo any of those effects absolutely can do so, and it is done.
Mm, beautiful. And on that note, perhaps you would like to do the prayer with for the eclipse. The
Yeah,
eclipse I've heard will bring 700,000 times fold whatever you put out there right
yes,
now, the
indeed.
energy.
Yeah, because we're still in the day of that. So
Yeah.
yeah. All right, let's just I'm inviting you who are watching to just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and soften your belly as you do. Relax your feet. And if you were born with a physical womb, just connect with it. If you were not, just connect with the Nada Bindu point, which is about 1.5 inches below your navel in your body. It's the portal passage through to your mother's holy womb and your lineage behind you, and to Mother Divine's holy womb. So we are honoring all the way from the navel to the vulva in the women and the perineum in the males. And just take your hand and begin circulating your hand in a soothing motion over your navel to the bottom of your pelvis there. In a clockwise direction. So your right hand goes to the left and down and to the right and up. So you're stirring in blessings, awakenings, understandings, and codes of the highest vibration in the protected way through a golden light transmission into these areas of your body with honoring and gratitude. Good. And now slowing down that circulation of your hand and having your hands in your lap now. Feeling the connection of that part of your body with your heart. Perhaps see figure eights going from those areas all the way up around your heart and back down. And now start the figure eights going from your heart to your third eye. And really now seeing all the chakras figure eighting together from crown to root. And drawing your attention to your third eye and lightly tilting your eyes up toward your crown in a very relaxed way. Begin to receive the rays of light from the highest vibrational allies and supporters of true love, light, and wisdom. Just feel them through the star realms, sending that beautiful information through your crown, down your chakras to your root. helping to connect you, Earthling, with our star kin, saying hello. We see you, we know you, we understand you, to them, and they're saying it to you, affirming that we're working together here. Earth and cosmos, eagle and condor, male and female, yoni and lingam. And just feel that beauty and that blessing and that assist coming to you, coming to us. We ask for the continued support in helping us to manifest the positive ascension timeline of awakening and the new earth, the 4D, 5D, and the sixth sun. And just invite that codes that are beneficial for you to keep that active and alive and continuing to awaken you and open within you, that they come to you now, that you are supremely protected. We're calling in Betala, the great protector, to assist you and all of us in this great work. And we call on all of these great priestesses who have become masters in the other domain to assist us with the womb awakenings for the benefit of all humans and all beings on the earth, and Gaia Sophia herself, in co-creative partnership. Thanks and blessed be. Taking a deep breath in and out and opening your eyes. Here we are, accelerated and activated.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Thank you, Michelle White Hart. Your heart is white and pure indeed.
Thank you, Marguerite, for all of your time and all of the work you've done and continue to do. And I look forward to doing this again, actually.
All right.
Okay.
Get down the road. Yes, so much more to talk about.
Actually, and yes, how can people get your book?
Okay. So the Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births, is available in print, in audiobook, which has special transmissions when I recorded it, and ebook, wherever books are sold. So that means Amazon, that means the Inner Traditions, my publisher's website itself, Barnes & Noble, indie.org, and you can always ask your brick and mortar bookstore to order it for you and have it in stock for others. You can also ask your libraries to bring it in and have it available in their stacks.
Wonderful. And I do look forward to listening to the audio version because of that transmission
Yes.
quality.
Yeah, I really did that in a prayerful and conscious way.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that will just open up, more, I think, in whoever is listening to their own,
I do.
Right?
Yes, yes. And I think I've already gotten some comments in that regard.
Oh.
If people would like to go deeper with the work on Mary, I have 2 courses on Mary. One is the Mother Mary Mystery Teachings, and then the Mother Mary Love and Empowerment Circle that's currently going on as of this filming will be available in replay once we complete that. And of course, the Holy Womb Chakra teachings that I mentioned, and all of these things and more, many free offerings and resources also can be found on the Seven Sisters Mystery School.com website. And the 7 is written out SEVEN.
Awesome. Great. Yes, that website is filled with goodies.
The brim.
To the brim. It's
I know
amazing.
we're regularly, taking stuff off and hiding it because it's just been an ongoing divine virgin birth prolifically since
Yeah,
2012.
that's right. You have birthed so much. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's an example of womb creativity without having physical children. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
me.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Marguerite. And
You're welcome. Thank you again, Michelle. Truly.
so welcome.